Welcome to the Niche Pursuits podcast. Today, we are joined by Carrie Forest, who is a food blogger and has a very successful site in the food and recipe niche. Now, Carrie started her site all the way back in 2009 and basically didn't pay attention to the SEO side of her website until 2018. She calls it her aha moment, or when the light bulb came on. And so she basically set out to resurrect a site that had never been written in a way that Google could find. And so nowadays, fast forward to today, 2022, the site is getting over 500,000 page views a month, creeping up to 650,000 or higher. Site is making over $20,000 a month. And so, as we do on the podcast, Carrie jumps on board and walks us through the key components that she went through to grow the site. First and most notably, to kind of get the site unstuck because it had never really been written for SEO. It had over 1,000 posts at the time. 3-4 years later, it actually has fewer posts today, even with her publishing tons of new content, than it did when she started resurrecting the site. So she walks us through kind of what she did in the early days of getting the site back on track, and then now how she's grown it and gotten it to where it is. I will tell you, one of my favorite parts of the interview is when we kind of rabbit trail and then deep dive into Google Web Stories. We haven't talked about that here on the podcast. Google Web Stories has been around since 2020 and even earlier if you look at earlier iterations of it. And she gets a lot of traffic from Google Web Stories. And so she talks about who it's for, generally speaking, how to put one together. We go into kind of keywording it, whether you should update your web stories, how many you should produce. So that was a really fun part of the interview. But we touch on all the things from keyword research to link building, to creating link bait, to updating articles, and of course, your mindset. She's had quite a long journey with this website, and she shares a lot of great inspirational thoughts about getting your mindset right. Hope you enjoy the interview with Carrie. It's a really good one. Have you been frustrated with your Google traffic lately? Are you tired of tools that make you search through millions of keywords and require a math degree to figure out? There's an SEO tool called RankIQ that can help. They're ranked #1 on G2 for both ease of use and customer satisfaction. RankIQ gives you a list of the lowest competition, high traffic keywords in your niche, and they are all clear winners. When you choose one of their hand-picked keywords, their AI takes over and gives you a simple report telling you what Google wants you to cover in your blog post. Whether you have a new site or have been around for a while, RankIQ will take your Google traffic to a whole new level. Go to rankiq.com/niche pursuits to lock yourself in at 50% off their monthly rate. I'll put this special link in the episode's description. Hey, Jared here. Today's episode is sponsored by onelittleweb.com, a bespoke link building service provider trusted by hundreds of niche site business owners just like you. One Little Web manually handpicks real and relevant sites for guest post backlinks that receive at least 5,000 monthly organic visitors from Google. The best part is that you can check the quality of the sites and approve or ask for replacements until you get the desired domains for your guest posts. So we've arranged an exclusive welcome offer for Niche Pursuits listeners, where you'll get a free DA40 backlink on your first order of a DA50 backlink. So again, you'll love One Little Web because A, they guarantee guest post backlinks with 5,000 plus monthly organic traffic sites. B, they let you review the sites beforehand and approve them. C, they write a 1,000 word, well-researched content post for every single guest post. So go to onelittleweb.com/niche pursuits to claim your free DA40 backlink today. Again, that's onelittleweb.com/niche pursuits. All right, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. My name is Jared Bauman. Today we are joined by Carrie Forest. Sorry about that. Welcome on board, Carrie.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, good to have you. Good to have you. You were saying at the outset that you're also a listener of the podcast, which is always great because you kind of know the types of things we talk about. We're talking websites today. No surprise there. But why don't you bring us up to speed a little bit on your backstory and how you got into the website you're building right now?
Okay, yeah, and I don't know if I've been living under a rock or what, but I really only discovered the Niche Pursuits podcast when the CEO of Mediavine was on, who's, most people know Mediavine is an ad company for websites, and I'm a Mediavine publisher. So that's how I was introduced to the podcast. And then I've really been binge listening and wondering, why I wasn't aware of the podcast sooner, because I've been getting tons and tons of value. And so I'm thrilled to actually be a guest on the podcast today.
That was a great interview with Eric. I remember his last name's hard to say, so I'm not going to even try to say it now. But Eric from Mediavine, that was a fascinating interview into the state of kind of ads now and going forward, and what Mediavine specifically is doing about it.
Yes, exactly. And we'll probably touch on that because of the third-party cookies going away, coming up in 2023, I believe, is the projected date. So yeah, there is some uncertainty when it comes to display advertising. And I'm especially concerned about that because about 90% of my revenue from my website comes from display advertising. So just to give you some background, I've actually been blogging since 2009, but it was really just a hobby and it was a way to connect with other people. I had no clue and no idea of how to monetize or that you even could monetize or make a business out of blogging. So I would say it took me, and I was doing other things. I got a master's in public health around 2000, starting around 2010. So I really didn't start to turn my website into a business until 2018. So for the first 9 years or so, it was just kind of having fun, meeting people, doing it as a hobby. But since around 2018, I connected with a food blogger, and I am a food blogger. One of my food blogging friends told me she was making like 6 figures a month, and it blew my mind. And I believe it was somebody on the Niche Pursuits podcast mentioned this idea that it took like centuries for the first human to reach a 4-minute mile, and then it only took a month for the second human to reach a 4-minute mile. And so I feel like that really happened with me. Once I realized the possibility that you could turn your website into a $1 million business, I was like, all the barriers were gone in my mind that were maybe holding me back, just because of realizing that it could be possible that, someone else like me could make that kind of money. I'm not making that kind of money yet, but I'm really very focused on getting there. And I hope that today I can share some of my strategies of how I'm trying to make the most money that I can with my website.
Walk us back to that moment in, I think you said 2018. What was the Lightbulb moment obviously was, oh my goodness, I'm kind of sitting on this website that has potential I never understood or never knew about. But what were the details of that, or the tactics involved? Like, what were you missing on that you learned in those moments that kind of started this new trajectory for your site?
I would say the biggest thing was an overall strategy mindset. And then getting into specifics, I had never done keyword research, which at this point kind of blows my mind. Like, I feel like I was so naive. But now, so, any time from 2009 to 2018, anything I blogged just came out of my brain, or maybe a reader asked me about a recipe or something like that, or a topic. And now every single post that I do is based on keyword research and, looking at search volume and competition. I'm lucky in a sense that my website, even all those years where it was just kind of a hobby, at least it was building some authority. So, and then I also got a master's degree in the field. So my site itself has some authority. It's not like I was starting from scratch. And then my site also has the EAT, the expertise, authority. What's the T?
Trustworthiness,
Trustworthiness.
trustfulness, trust
Yes.
with some things on the end of it.
Right. So my degree gives my site some of that too. So, but yeah, I mean, just this overall idea of having a strategy, and then I think also just having a goal.
Mm-hmm.
So I got it in my mind that I wanted to reach 1 million monthly page views. So I would say in 2018, my site was getting maybe I was already a member of Mediavine because I had joined Mediavine in 2014. But even in 2018, my site was maybe getting 30,000 page views a month.
Yeah, their traffic requirements have kind of gone up over the years. So there probably was lower back then, maybe 10, 20,000 if I have my history right. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So, for many years, I had wanted to have 100,000 monthly page views because that was the point when you could join AdThrive, which for many years was kind of like the elite advertising agency. In my mind, now Mediavine and AdThrive are at the same level. So it took me, once I started applying strategy and keyword research, it didn't take too long to get to that 100,000 monthly page view mark, I would say by 2019. And so I was starting to make a little bit of money and feeling pretty happy about that. And then pretty quickly after that, I got up to 250,000 monthly page views. And at this point where I stand now in 2022, and I've done a lot in the last year, I really dialed in my strategy, which we can talk about. But now I'm sitting anywhere from it's summer now, so page views are a little slower. I'd say anywhere from 475,000 up to my high earlier this year was 650,000 page views. So I'm getting closer to that million monthly page view. And there's nothing like, you don't get a medal or a trophy or anything once you hit 1 million monthly page views. But for me, that's just like this goal that I'm, in my mind, kind of sets you apart as like an elite, especially in the food blogging arena, sets you apart. I can't imagine that many, I mean, there probably are quite a few blogs that are reaching 1 million monthly page views. I would say within the food blogging niche, it's got to be in the top 5 to 10%. That's just my kind of guess.
So 2018, the site was getting, under 50,000 page views a month. And now fast forward 4 years later, it's, between 500,000, 600,000, 700,000 page views a month and growing. I mean, that's fantastic. You were saying that most of your revenue, most of your income comes from Mediavine. Are there, just before we kind of dive into the details, are there any other kind of figures about the site you'd be comfortable sharing? Maybe the number of articles or posts you have, maybe roughly the amount of revenue you make a month, just so people can kind of get their mind around what type of site we're looking at.
Okay, sure. So I really took my strategy to the next level, I would say in May 2021, and we can talk about that. But essentially, I started outsourcing some of my work, some of my content. So prior to May 2021, I was doing everything by myself. I had no content writers. I don't even think I had any virtual assistants. And at that point, I was making less than 10,000 a month. And that does not include my expenses. So, every website owner knows there's like hosting fees, and I do work with a tech company who manages my back end. So there's always like a minimum amount of expenses that you have unless you really want to do everything by yourself. But in 1 year, from May 2021 to May 2022, my revenue grew. I looked it up because I wanted to share that. Let's see, where is it? My revenue has up 71%.
Yeah.
My page views are up 60%. So at this point, before expenses, I'm pulling in about 20,000 a month. And my expenses have gone up because I did start outsourcing.
Right.
But I'm also a very, I don't want to say cheap. I'm a very penny-wise person. I'm a frugal person, especially because I've done most everything myself. So I really, really try to keep my expenses. For a long time, I tried to keep them under 5,000 a month. I've been kind of easing up on that a little bit because I've seen how when I spend money, I can earn a lot more money.
Mm-hmm.
So I can spend $1 and earn $5 maybe. I'm not sure of the exact figure.
Yeah.
But at
Yeah.
this point, yeah, my expenses are around $6,000 a month.
That's great. That's great. Man, there's so many questions I have for you. Okay.
Okay.
Let me kick off our deeper dive with this question. Then let's maybe, we don't have to go all the way back to 2018, but when you started on a different focus, right? You started focusing on this website with a new lens, and a lens of getting to 1 million page views, and obviously all the monetization opportunities that were also in front of you. And I think this applies, by the way, that's why I'm asking to a lot of maybe the people listening who have this site that maybe they haven't treated it with very much interest for a period of time. Maybe they did a lot of work on it prior, and now it's kind of sat dormant for a while. Or maybe they have been blogging on it, they have been writing for it, but they haven't been doing it the right way. No keyword research or something like that. And so this question is kind of posed for these types of people. What did you do to get that site going in the right direction? Did you go back and update a lot of the old content? Or did you kind of just say, well, let's just start fresh from here and go forward with this new strategy and approach?
No, I definitely have, especially this past year, I've done a huge focus on updating old content. So that is definitely one of my strategies. So prior to 2018, I was coming up on 1,000 posts because I'd been blogging for almost 10 years. But 80% of those were crap because they weren't keyword research. Right. They were just, my photos were horrible. I would say 80% of my posts are recipes because that's what my audience always asks me for. But then about the rest, 20% were health articles. And because I do have, I know that's a very kind of like your money or your life industry, but because of my master's degree in public health, I'm fortunate that I can write on those topics and I can rank. So I have gone back. I deleted around 2018, I would say I did delete several hundred posts that had no value to the site, and they weren't going to be able to be updated. Stuff like giveaways and old product reviews. Looking back on that, maybe I wouldn't have deleted, but I'm happy, that my site now is pretty streamlined. So right now I'm sitting around 670 posts, and I have the feeling that no matter what posts any of my readers land on, I want them to really represent or be representative of the quality of my site. And, for better or for worse, I'm definitely a perfectionist and a little bit just kind of a stickler about wanting everything to look really good and to offer value. I don't want somebody to come to my site and land on an old post that hasn't been updated since whenever and just think like, oh, this site isn't great. I want them to be blown away, frankly. So I put a huge focus on that. I think in the last, because I do an annual SEO audit as well with a outside provider. And he has pushed me as well to really try to update almost like a 2-to-1. So 2 posts, update 2 posts as opposed to publishing 1 post.
Wow.
So
that's some good advice, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's worth it because, and there's so many tools now. So one of the strategies that I'll do is I do have a paid account with Ahrefs. So I will take a URL that's, say it's, I usually wait about a year. So if a post is 1 year old or older, I will take that URL, I'll drop it into Ahrefs, and I will look and see what keywords it's ranking for. I'll also look at its history of search traffic. So I can see if it's continuing to rise. Maybe it's just about a year old and for some reason it's just finally getting traction. I might hold off on doing anything to it, but more than likely, if a post is older than a year old, I'll see that maybe it had a bump in traffic and keywords when it was published, and now it started to fall off. And so I will look at the keyword, because usually, one post could have 100 keywords, and I'll look at the one that's the most popular. Hopefully it's related to that post, and I'll go back, and if it's a recipe, maybe I'll reshoot the photos. If it's an article, I will try to, sometimes I do have to rewrite the whole thing Obviously, if a post is in the top 3, if it's ranking in the top 3 for a keyword, I'm not going to touch it. But in my mind, if a post really isn't getting several hundred page views a month and it's older than a year old, then it's fair game for me to decimate it or really give it a complete remodel.
What are the things you do to give it a remodel? I mean, you mentioned some of the things, maybe take new photos, and you're in a very photo-centric niche, right? So that's obviously, I mean, very important. But if it's not going where you want it to go, if it's dropped off a bit, what other types of things do you look at updating?
Yeah, I mean, I'll see what other keywords it's ranking for. Usually it'll rank for something that I had no intention of it ranking for.
Mm-hmm.
So I will maybe take it, add some paragraphs in a different direction. I've started adding, I use the Yoast FAQ schema plugin.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if that's the right word. Block. I think it's a block.
Mm-hmm.
I will use that because a lot of my FAQ blocks will then show up in Google. So maybe in previous, like a couple years ago, I wasn't using that block. I don't even know if it existed. So now I will change any FAQs into that block.
Yeah. You'll add the schema or the structured data markup to tell Google that, hey, I'm answering some important questions here. And then, that does have effects, and you can get picked up by Google in different ways because of the way you're communicating to them. Yeah.
And then one of the biggest things that happened for me in 2021 is I would say, a second big light bulb moment in that I have a brother-in-law who is a venture capitalist. And just as a mind game, I thought to myself, because, his firm, they fund businesses. I thought to myself, what would happen if I had $1 million infusion of cash? And I mean, it would be hard to spend $1 million as one person on a blog. But then it occurred to me, well, I personally don't really want to take outside money and give away control of my business. But I thought, because I had started making more money, I thought, what if I just, instead of being the tightwad I am, what if I actually took some of my excess cash and I invested $10,000 in my business, as opposed to me being so controlling and not wanting to spend any extra pennies. And that was a light bulb moment. So up until that point, I had taken all these food photography classes, invested thousands of dollars. I really wasn't getting much anywhere with my own personal food photography. It wasn't my passion, which is kind of ironic as a food blogger. You kind of assume that food bloggers are all amazing food stylists, amazing food photographers. It just wasn't my passion. So I started outsourcing my food photography. And immediately, those photos are 100 times better than anything I could ever shoot. Plus, it freed up so much more of my time.
Right.
So that was a big change for me in 2021. And it allowed me also to go from publishing 1 to 2 times a week to going up to 5 times a week. Now, at this point, I'm publishing 7 to 9 times a week.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So that's been a huge change. Not only that, but I started looking into this world of virtual assistants and having people help me with getting the blog posts all set up. So I farm out the food photography. The photographer sends me these beautiful photos. And then I have a virtual assistant who I can send her the photos. She can get the blog post all set up for me. Then I can just go in and tweak it and, add all the internal links, maybe add some keywords. And it's just really streamlined my process. And it's allowed me to become almost like an editor-in-chief, as opposed to the writer, the food photographer, the recipe tester, the keyword researcher, doing like 1,000 jobs where I could only publish 1 to 2 times a week. I'm still doing 1,000 jobs, but I'm doing more of the jobs that I like more of the strategy. And I consider myself like the brain of my business. And then I have all these helpers Of course, they have brains too, but they're so much more skilled than I am in food photography, sometimes in writing and organization. I even consider, like the people who I consult with about SEO. I mean, they know so much more about SEO than I do. So I'm willing to pay them, and then I can apply that stuff to my website instead of me having to go out and keep up with every single, SEO change or whatever.
There's something to be said, and a lot of people will advise this, that outsourcing unlocks so much untapped potential, and you went through it so eloquently. Like, it just allows you to do so much more. You basically went from 1 to 2 posts a week to 7 to 9 posts a week, but you also had spent over a decade. But even if we just look at maybe from 2018 on, you'd spent 3 years at that point doing all these things yourself, and there's something to be said for that. Yes, outsourcing can unlock so much potential for your business and your website, but perhaps the reason you have been so successful at it is because you had 3 years plus a decade prior to really understand what you wanted done by these additional people you're adding on.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because you can put out I usually find people in Facebook groups, but you'll find people who are willing to sell you any kind of service. And so you have to be careful about who you hire and who you're going to trust with your business. And I feel really lucky that, I've definitely had to go through people, and I like to test people. So I don't immediately hire somebody. And by the way, they're all contract employees. They're not actual employees.
W-2.
Yeah. So it's good, I think, I found, to have people do a test, and just be really careful about what you're outsourcing. And then I think to really outsource the stuff that you really dread doing, or like with me, with my food photographer, I gave it such a try, and I have all this expensive camera equipment now sitting, like the batteries have all drained out and everything. So I'll probably have to get rid of it at some point, but yeah. And by the way, it still was a test. In May 2021, I really was like, I am just going to test this out and see what $10,000 will do for my business. And within, I think it was by July of 2021, I had my first $10,000 ad month, which I had never gotten close to earning $10,000 a month in ad revenue.
2 months later.
Exactly. So, from there, it's just, so I would say, if you're starting to think about outsourcing, to start slow and really try to build a team that you feel like their skills are better than what you could do, even with tons of training. That they're just really skilled at what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And it makes it worth it, because then because it is painful to have your expenses double or even triple. But if you realize that the value you're getting is so much more than what you could have done, it makes it worth it for sure.
So we've talked about updating content, and we've talked about scaling content, really. Outsourcing, but scaling through outsourcing. What other things, maybe core things, have you done over the last couple of years that have helped this site grow so much?
Okay, well, I think we should talk about keyword research, and also capitalizing on content that's already doing well. But I just wanted to mention that this strategy of me trying to publish more content, going from 2 posts a week to sometimes 9 posts a week, is kind of my proactive way of addressing this upcoming issue of the change in third-party cookies, which nobody really knows. I've been trying to ask everybody in the industry, like, how is that going to affect ad revenue? But of course, nobody knows. I even have a contact at Google, just from that Google creators team. I think they've started this new kind of push to try to market to creators. I have the upcoming interview with them. And I even was asking this Google employee, like, what's going to happen with ad? And she said they were concerned about it as well, of course, because Google makes money from ads. Right. So nobody really knows, but this is my main strategy of dealing with the potential loss of ad revenue, is trying to make it up with volume. So that's another one of my kind of reasons why I'm shooting for 1 million monthly page views, or just as much traffic as I can get, because God forbid ad revenue goes down 30, 50, 60%. If I have that much more volume, then I can at least try to keep up with my earnings where they are now.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to throw that in there. And again, just emphasize that nobody really knows. So we're not going to know what happens until it happens.
And again, I'll just a little plug, but if you haven't caught up on that interview we did with Eric from Mediavine, it's a very technical deep dive, but he's pretty candid and pretty honest about, hey, here are the different things at play. Here are the different possibilities. And then here are some things that are being done, but, really gives you a good understanding of what the current status of third-party cookies as they relate to ad revenue, what the status is.
Yes. I think we should maybe, or I would love to share some of this information about keyword research and capitalizing content that's doing well. And I think if you're a blogger, you kind of already know this, but I think it's worth emphasizing the idea that if you look at what is doing well on your site, it means so the post that you're ranking number one for, let's say your top 10% posts, if you just go and look at those, the top 10% of posts that are driving most of your traffic, if you look at those keywords, it's kind of like a duh thing. But if you think, okay, Google sees you as an authority for those keywords. And even if you don't consider yourself an authority, Google is considering you an authority. And so don't take that for granted. For me, my site is based around gluten-free and dairy-free recipes, and kind of about I talk about holistic health information for women with chronic disease, because I've had my own personal health journey. And of course, as I mentioned, I have a educational background in nutrition. So, but yet I rank for the most random things like celery juice and beet juice, and are two of my highest traffic posts. And those posts are actually pretty old, but Google sees me as an authority. So I have tried, not so much with celery juice, but I probably should, but with beet juice, I've really tried to do other posts surrounding just how to make beet juice, like beet juice powder, the benefits of beet juice. And I've made these all into new blog posts. And the cool thing about looking at keywords for stuff that you're already ranking for is that it means that you don't necessarily have to find super low competition keywords, because Google sees you as an authority.
Right,
so
you're already an authority.
Yes, you can go for higher competition. So my benefits of beet juice, I think I rank in the top 3, and sometimes will outrank Harvard Medical School, Dr. Oz Show, Healthline, which are, all those sites are way bigger than mine and have much higher domain authority. But for those types of keywords, I can actually compete with them. So again, I just think it's worth pointing that out, that try to take some time to maybe go into a keyword research tool and put in those keywords you're already ranking really well for, and just look for some offshoots that maybe you wouldn't have thought about otherwise. So I've done that. And then I don't know if you've had guests talk about Google Web Stories
None
in the past.
Never.
Okay, so Google Web Stories, they were released, I believe, in November, I want to say 2021. I don't think it was 2020. I was a little late to Google Web Stories, but it was sometime in the last couple of years. So okay. Google Web Stories, I can only see them on my phone. I can't see them on my iPad or on my desktop. But if you look at your phone, and I think it's Android and iPhones, if you put in I would put in a keyword for a recipe. So I don't know, anything. You could put in beet juice. And then if you scroll up past the first few search results, there's something called visual stories. And those are web stories. And it's a new feature that Google introduced.
Got them right here.
Okay, yeah. And so not because it's new, it's like uncharted territory, and they have the potential to send hundreds of thousands of page views to your site a month. And so it's a little bit of a task getting them set up. You have to install the plugin, which is the actual Google brand, the branded Google Web Story plugin. You have to do a couple of tweaks, and Mediavine has a great article on their website about how to set it up, because you want to do a couple things. I'm not super technical. That's why I have somebody, a firm helping me with the tech stuff. But you want to, there's just a few tweaks, let's say. So there's a little bit of a process getting set up, but then once you learn how to create them, they're not super hard to create. It's kind of like a blog post. And Google wants you to use video, but I don't use video in my web stories. I just use my static images from a blog post. And I've done web stories for my recipes as well as articles.
Okay. I was going to ask about that.
So it's not just recipes. Because I do have these articles. So I'll actually also do some web stories about like roundups. So I'll do one of my best web stories is best juicing recipes for beginners, because I rank well for juices. So if you've never done web stories, I would look into it. And that's how I went from 400,000 page views up to 650,000 in February or March this year, because I had just a few web stories driving insane amounts of traffic, like 150,000 page views in a month.
Okay, can I ask a couple quick questions about web stories? Because we have not talked about this. And so now you just got me chomping at the bit here. So are these, I'm likening it in my brain a little bit to Google Discover with some of my clients at my market agency. They do very well in Google Discover. And those articles, when they hit Google Discover, or maybe, they'll pop for 3 days and then they'll just drop off in terms of Discover traffic. Are web stories like that, or do they go on for a while? How does it work?
It depends, but usually it is just like a big bump in traffic. If you're lucky, like I've gotten lucky a few times, I got, a week of insane traffic from one web story. And the data will show up in Discover. So you can actually see which web stories are driving traffic. Yeah. So you'll see if you go into your Discover tab in Google Search Console, you'll see the URLs that are giving you the Google Discover traffic. And your URL for any web story will show web story versus like your regular blog post that might show up in Google Discover. It's just your regular blog post URL. So my recommendation, because they have been out now for about, I'm going to say a year or longer. It's definitely been let's say about a year. My recommendation, what I've noticed, because at first, when I first started them, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I started doing web stories for every single one of my blog posts, but they take about 15 minutes to create one. And you can create a template and you end up just dropping your photos and the information in there, and you can link every slide of a web story is linkable, which is amazing, as opposed to what they look like. If people are familiar with Pinterest idea pins, they look like a Pinterest idea pin, but Pinterest idea pins don't link,
they don't give you any traffic.
Yeah, it's beyond frustrating. Google Web Stories are linkable. Every single page is linkable, and you can set up the link. So like I have a few that are roundup, so I'll have each slide of a web story linked to a different post.
So that was going to be my next question is, are they monetizable? It sounds like the web story itself isn't, but then you can link out to pages that then will get secondary traffic.
Yes, you can actually monetize your web stories.
Oh, okay.
I believe it's Google ads.
AdSense,
so,
maybe?
Yeah, so the ones that were showing were like warts on the feet. They were like not very good for a food blogger. So and they were only getting me like less than $10 a month.
AdSense pays so low on the RPMs, then you'd probably be getting a low RPM, and then you're getting
exactly
maybe not ads that are quite as targeted.
Yeah, and then it was affecting my RPM through Mediavine. So I turned off ads on my web stories, but again, because they're so easily linkable, they have definitely monetized because they go right to my blog post. So a couple things. My recommendation at this point is, so I would actually look at your phone if you're thinking about doing a web story, because not every keyword is going to have a visual story on Google. So I would put it into your phone and look and see if there already are, visual stories before you spend the time doing one. I would do web stories for your top posts, because it seems to me that in my experience, the Google web stories that I do for my top ranked posts are more likely to show up on that front page of Google. Because I have a lot of web stories at this point. I'm over 300. I ended up hiring a virtual assistant to do them for me. But I would say less than 10% of them are driving traffic. I just decided to do an approach of like, let's just cover the bases and get as much traffic as I can. But if you don't want to hire them out or whatever, if you're doing them yourself, just do them for your top 10 posts and see if it helps. But kind of like do a little research and make sure that Google is showing web stories or visual stories for that keyword, because they're not doing it for everything. I've noticed, like for real technical stuff, like health stuff, they're not really doing it, but just for random keywords, you'd be surprised what they're showing these stories for.
So let's say I do a web story on beet juice, and it does really well, and I'm hooked. It dies off after a little bit. Do I do another one? Do I repost my old web story that did well, maybe a couple weeks later? Because obviously, as content creators, we're in the mindset of, publish an article. It does well. If it drops off, we'll go back and update the article. It does well. It drops off. Well, update it again. It does well. Do some secondary articles that are related to that. Is kind of a similar concept with web stories, or you take a different approach?
Well, I think it's kind of up in the air at this point. It's a little bit like the Wild West. Yeah. So once I have a web story that is doing really well, and now I have so many, so it's a little bit hard for me to keep up on it. Like on what they're doing. I definitely know when some are really like hitting and doing well, but I have so many that I kind of just let them go. I tried to do a little bit of strategy with them where I put the URL of the web story in Ahrefs, and I could see what keywords it was ranking for. And then I went in and I saw one that wasn't doing well. I changed the URL and updated it. And it didn't have an effect. It didn't necessarily make it go crazy again or get any more traffic. So I just let it go. And then I kind of try to talk with other bloggers and see what's happening with their Google web stories. I've heard that it's not great to have two web stories going to the same URL, but that's totally just rumor. Nobody really knows.
Well, I looked it up while we're sitting here talking, and Google Web Stories used to be AMP Stories, and they rebranded them as Web Stories and relaunched in May of 2020. So we're about 2 years in now, it looks like.
Okay.
Yeah. Wow. That was fun. I think we could do an entire episode on that, but I don't want to hijack all the other good things you have to say.
Okay.
So thank you for talking though about the web stories. That's I have that underlined in my notes here.
Cool. Yeah.
I got down that path by talking about keywords and keyword research and kind of how you're using existing content that's performing well to then dovetail that into new topics. Did we cover everything you wanted to talk about in the keyword research arena?
Yeah, I would say that tracking keywords, I think, is really important. There's a lot of different tools that you can use to track keywords. But I think that's somewhere where I kind of fell short, where I had keywords in the past and obviously blog posts that were doing really well. And then after a year or two, they would start to fall off, meaning that maybe a better ranked site did a better article than me, but I didn't necessarily go back and revisit the post. So by tracking keywords, and I mean, there's so many tools, there's so many different ways you can do that. I try to keep it pretty simple. I use the Ahrefs tracking. You can track keywords within Ahrefs. I also use Key Search as one of my main keyword research tools, and it's a lot less expensive than Ahrefs for anyone who's on a tighter budget. And Key Search has the ability to track keywords. But again, I'm not trying to look at blog posts that are really new. I kind of like let a blog post do its thing for about a year. But anything over a year or so, I consider fair game. And I want to see, is it still gaining traffic, or has it peaked and it's starting to go down? And you really don't know that unless you're tracking your keywords. So that's something that I just think is super important for people to do, for bloggers to do.
Let's talk a bit, if we could, about links. You kind of said at the outset that your site has so much age going for it that I imagine it's picked up links along the way organically. Is there a link building strategy in place? Because food is somewhat competitive. I mean, it sounds like you are taking a bit of a specialized approach in certain sections of the food niche you're in, but it's a competitive niche, and to get 500 plus thousand page views a month, I'm curious if you have any link building strategies.
Yeah, I would say that that's probably an area that I could work on. The food blogging niche is extremely competitive, but one of the really cool things is that food bloggers love to do roundups.
Yes, you guys love to share with each other and actually link to each other, whereas everybody else in the SEO industry doesn't seem to want to.
Exactly. So if you're a food blogger, you probably already know there are specialized Facebook groups just for roundups. And so I keep an eye on those. And since I do have so many recipes, if somebody's looking for a certain type of recipe, I'll just drop my link there. That's probably my main link building strategy. I did try the Help a Reporter out for a while, but mostly those reporters are looking for dietitians or medical professionals to really interview and ask questions. I got a few links that way, but I don't know. I found the emails to be a little bit annoying just because they send out so many times. I just don't really have time. I think actually, as my business grows, I think that could be something that a virtual assistant could keep an eye on for me, but I haven't, really gone into that. I think one thing that I have done is, like I said, okay, let's say like 99% of my posts are based on keyword research. There's another 1%, let's say 1 to 5% of my posts that I'm going to do simply because my readers are asking for it, or I'm going to call it kind of like link bait. So I have a few examples. My site is, as I mentioned, really focused on gluten-free and dairy-free recipes. So I decided to do a post on how to get started going gluten-free and dairy-free. And there really was no search volume on that when I did this post a couple of years ago. But I thought, like somebody coming to my site, that's probably pretty important because maybe they've been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease and they're feeling really overwhelmed. So this would probably be a good post just to have on my site as like important. And so I wrote that post, and then, it ended up ranking number 1 for that keyword. And it does drive quite a bit of traffic. And then, as you know, if you have a post ranked number 1 or probably 1 to 3 for almost any keyword, if a journalist or somebody else is looking to link to that keyword, they're probably just going to grab your link. And so that makes it really easy. So that's what I would call as what I call link bait, or just kind of going outside of keyword research and just thinking about some stuff that you think is important for your site to have and that you could cover really well and hopefully rank in the top 1 to 3 slots.
Yeah, you're right. Journalists will grab that, especially if it's about a topic. And I think that's maybe an important distinction to make. Because if it's not a topic that maybe someone would be looking for to quote, then it might not get the links, even if it's a topic that people are looking for.
Exactly.
But yeah, if it's some sort of topic that journalists want to write about and they need, and then you're number one. We've talked about link building a little bit before. It's funny you mentioned that because it's come up before from other people. And, link building is such a challenging task for everyone. Even if you know what you're doing, it's time consuming and expensive. And then if you don't know what you're doing, it's really confusing and complicated. So any link you can earn through link bait is, you don't have to go out and do all the rest of the work. Okay.
Yeah. And I would also say that just going on podcasts as a guest, going to speak at events, you're likely going to get a link on someone's site from doing that. And going on a podcast is a lot more time efficient to get a link. It's like basically an hour of your time than trying to email tons of people and not spending hours doing that. You're like guaranteed, you're almost guaranteed a link if you're a guest on a podcast versus sending out hundreds of emails. So yeah, I try to keep my link building really organic, and I would say that my site thrives in spite of my lack of link building. And even though my site is old, the funny thing is, like back in the day in 2009, we used to do like these link we called them link parties, where there was this old school plugin where you would link to each other, because this was before social media, and so it was a way for bloggers to connect. And like, anyways, I am probably not explaining it correctly, but I got a lot of links from those types of things. But now I would say 99% of those domains are gone. And so they're really not, I don't think they're really helping my site that much.
Right.
So
let's, as we kind of come to the end here, I want to ask you a little bit more about maybe some of the intangibles that have led to your success. You haven't mentioned it, but I feel like taking a step back, there's just been an incredible amount of, I don't know if perseverance is the right word, but endurance, maybe just endurance to get to where you're at. I don't know, do you have any specific examples about that endurance that you feel like have contributed to the success of your website?
Oh yeah. I mean, the bottom line is if you want to be successful, you have to be determined and work your butt off. Honestly, like I don't know any other super successful bloggers that aren't working their butt off. And it can feel discouraging because I don't know, maybe you see other bloggers being more successful than you, but I would be willing to bet, and I'll, just tell you my personal schedule. I'm working on this work-life balance thing, but I do work my butt off. I mean, as soon as I wake up in the morning, like the first thing I think about is my website. I feed my cats first so they don't bother me. They don't bug me, but the only reason I do that is so I can go right to work.
Because they don't bug you away from your website.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I'm probably, and I think other bloggers can relate, but yeah, it's like a very, very firm focus on page views. So I let social media kind of just go in the background. I'm focused on page views. So anything that's not going to directly bring traffic to my site and that I can't see revenue the next day in my report is not a priority. So publishing, sharing my blog posts on Facebook has been a really great traffic building strategy for me. I don't know how long that's going to last, but there are tons of really specialized Facebook groups, private or public Facebook groups that are based around like diet and nutrition, and probably for a lot of other specialty fields as well, like medical issues, or I don't know, but I get a lot of traffic from Facebook groups. So like Instagram, even though I think it's fun and I do check in on it way too much, I'm not really focused on like making reels and stuff because I just don't really care, because Instagram people don't click through to my site.
Because it's all about page views.
Yeah, for me, it's all
Yeah.
about page views.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
tried YouTube for a while. I felt like YouTube has some value because I had a couple of YouTube videos go viral, and then I noticed that they were connected to a blog post, and it boosted that blog post higher in the rankings. But I mean, that's a pretty tough strategy to spend a whole day making a YouTube video, the hopes that it's going to go viral. So I've let YouTube I hope to get back to it sometime, but it's not a priority now. But I think one thing, talking about these intangibles, is along with this kind of laser focus, it can start to feel discouraging if you're not reaching your goals fast enough or seeing like the competition and stuff. So you need to embrace like an abundant mindset, which is something that I work on. But the idea that no matter how competitive it is, like I have a place and my blog has a place in the landscape. I'm offering value. There's room for me as well as, Healthline or other gluten-free, dairy-free bloggers. Like there's room for us all. It's really hard to keep that mindset, but it's something that I think is important and something that I work on. And then the work-life balance is really hard, but that's something that I'm working on as well, because I'm like the driver of my business. And even though I have a lot of helpers now, like they don't have the ability to publish. I've never like let go of that control to let somebody else hit publish. So I'm still the main person of my website. I'm the final authority. But if something happens to me, like if I get sick because I've overworked myself, the whole enterprise comes to a screeching halt. And so I have to keep that in mind, that I can't work, 24/7. But so that's tough, especially when you are publishing like 7 times a week. That's like basically 1 time a day. So sometimes, I'll take a day off. And then recognizing that you can't do it all. You can't do web stories and keyword research and, like I mentioned, like shooting all the photos, testing all the recipes. There's no way I could do all that in a day and every day. So I've had to outsource. And so if you're feeling totally overwhelmed and there's stuff that you really dread doing, consider outsourcing it, and you might be surprised.
2 things you said I wanted to highlight, because I mean, a lot of people, certainly right now, last week's episode was about how to recover from a Google update, and there's been a lot of that happening. We had a rather large update happen in the spring of 2022, recording summer of 2022. But, the mindset that people have had has gotten knocked back a bit for those who got dinged or hit by this update. So I think your mindset really specifically can speak to people who might have had a setback or two along the way. And then, there's such a tendency, right, where, these podcasts we do are super inspirational, and you get people on that are really tactical, but you also, you have an incredible amount of focus. You have a goal, or at least a priority every day of page views, and every decision you make feeds back to whether it's getting you closer to that goal or not closer to that goal. And you're saying no to a lot of stuff. And yes, now you're doing web stories. And yes, now you're able to do 7 to 9 articles a week, but you can't do all that yourself. And so if you are someone who's not at the point where you have everything outsourced like you do, you got to say yes to certain things, but say no to a lot of things, and really prioritize. So, and the whole interview really has spoken to that. I think you've done a very good job of really outlining the clear path you took from doing everything to now starting to not do everything.
Yeah. And I would also, just on that point of core updates, because we didn't talk about this, but I got hit right when I was getting my groove in 2000, I said in 2018. So in 2019, there was an update. It was never like, they never announced it, but it was September or November. Now I can't remember. It was a painful day. 2019, my site got hit with a core update hugely. I lost 60% of my traffic in one day.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a big one then.
So if you're undergoing that, I can identify. I cried. I don't cry that often. I cried that day.
I've gotten hit by an update. I'm not sure if I cried, but I sure felt like it. I might have.
It was so discouraging. And that's actually when I started doing and actually like paying a consultant to come in and look at my technical SEO, meaning he showed me I had all these broken links that I hadn't fixed. I had actually been using my headers wrong. I didn't know about headers. I'm kind of embarrassed to say I'd been using, like I would throw in an H2 just because I liked how it looked.
Yep. We deal with that a lot with our clients here at the age. I'm like, they're like, I just thought it was a sizing thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I like all this stuff I thought was really not that big of a deal. I mean, 60% of my traffic overnight. And by the way, it took about a year to get that back because you're really not going to recover that traffic, first of all, until you fix whatever happened as best as you can. And secondly, until there's another core update, because Google's not going to come and reassess your site until there's another core update. And I think it took about another two.
I was going to say, I hate to say, but it's not uncommon for it to be more than one unless you just get Johnny on the spot and make those changes really quickly. Like, it could be more than one update, which is even more discouraging, but I suppose setting expectations.
Yeah. So I learned my lesson. I'm very attuned to technical SEO. So I run like a broken link checker on my site, like once a month. I'm just like super really scared about that. But I have to say, Google has rewarded me. So in these more recent core updates, I have gotten a boost, and that makes up a little bit for all the pain of getting hurt by a core update. But yeah, it's painful. It's so discouraging. It's awful.
And look at where your site is now. I mean, if you were in 2019, so that was maybe 2.5 years ago, it sounds like, and didn't give up, didn't throw in the towel, even though, again, the word is very difficult when you have a traffic loss of that size to not give up. And speaking back to, what last week's episode was addressing, and that's such a common feeling. But I mean, here we have the very following week after we do a podcast on how to recover from an update. Here we have basically a really, really emblematic success story from one.
Thank you. Yeah. And it also helped. I think as bloggers, we can get really lonely and feel like nobody can identify, which I think is one reason I love the podcast so much, is I feel like you really understand, you, Jared, like with your questions, what bloggers are up against and what we have to deal with. And I mean, as I understand, you're a blogger yourself, but if you can connect with other bloggers, like either, like in the Facebook group or whatever, there will be other bloggers that also are struggling with the same thing. And it helped me a lot. Like I connected with one other blogger at that time, 2019, when that happened. I mean, we just commiserated for months and until now we're both, have recovered. But it helped a lot to have somebody understand what I was going through. And, we could kind of share our upset and our rage, quite frankly.
Our anger.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was horrible. It really is.
It's disappointing that's fluffing it up a little bit or putting it nicely, but yeah. Well, wow, that hour flew by. Carrie, how can people follow along with what you're doing, or connect with you?
Yeah, I'm really open to emails or direct messages on Instagram because I kind of feel like I'm at the point now in my career of blogging where like mentorship is kind of fun. And I like interacting with other people. And again, like it's 90% of the time, it's just me typing behind my computer, not interacting with people. So it's fun to connect with people. So you can feel free to email me if you have specific questions. I'm Carrie at cleaneatingkitchen.com, or I'm Clean Eating Carrie on Instagram. So you can message me and, usually get back within a couple of days. And I also just wanted to make sure that you, as a blogger, realize like you should celebrate your wins along the way. So whether you're just hitting 50,000 page views, or you just got accepted into an ad network, it can you can reach your goals, and it's like I said, you don't get a trophy or a medal. You have to celebrate yourself. You have to really it can be hard to talk to people outside the industry. So I don't know, find somebody who you can like have as a buddy or you can talk about your successes with. Because like, of course, the revenue is amazing. It makes you feel good. But at the end of the day, like the money, it feels good, but it's, I don't know, it's only like one part of the journey. And then I also found this piece of advice a few years ago. I don't know where it came from, but it said, be so good that they can't ignore you. Whereas, like, I think of they as like Google or maybe my user or just the blogosphere in general. So I just try to have that attitude with everything I do, is try to be like the highest quality and just do the very best you can. And eventually you will get recognized in, various forms, but you really, if you're doing good work, like really you authentically want to put out good material, and help people, I really believe that you'll be recognized for it, whether it's financially or, I don't know, being on podcasts or getting interviewed or whatever. But that's my philosophy.
I think it's great. I'm glad you touched on it too, because, in closing, like we don't get trophies or medals or really any physical thing for what we do. I remember we had Michael Donovan on a month or two ago, and he was lucky enough to actually get a check for his first dollar that he made online. His wife framed it for him, which is great. But you talk about the revenue as kind of the benefit, but I mean, it just gets transferred into our accounts. It is great, but we don't get those physical kind of attaboys, responses, good jobs. And so, yeah, celebrating and find a way to celebrate the wins along the way, because you don't get a trophy. I love
right.
that.
And also, like, when it comes to revenue, like it does, of course, it's amazing. Like it feels amazing, but it's like a little awkward too. You can't just tell random people, I made $10,000 this month. Like that isn't like part of our societal norms. Maybe you can tell a trusted friend. Still, it's a little awkward. So I think that's another reason why I really like page views. I can tell my friends, I had a million, I haven't reached it yet, but when I reach 1 million monthly page views, yeah, I'm going to tell them, but I'm not telling them how much money I made every month.
Good
that
point.
Kind of thing.
Good point. Oh man, this was fun. I mean, obviously, I think from just a purely tactical standpoint, learning all about web stories was great. And a total surprise, we did not have that on the agenda. So that was really fun. But good. I mean, what a journey since 2009, kind of rediscovered in 2018, and now here 2022, well eclipsing 500,000 page views a month. $20,000 a month and onwards and upwards to $1 million. I can tell you're focused on it. So you're going to get there. I have you back on when you hit that number.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Carrie, thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jared.
Have you been frustrated with your Google traffic lately? Are you tired of tools that make you search through millions of keywords and require a math degree to figure out? There's an SEO tool called RankIQ that can help. They're ranked #1 on G2 for both ease of use and customer satisfaction. RankIQ gives you a list of the lowest competition, high traffic keywords in your niche, and they're all clear winners. When you choose one of their hand-picked keywords, their AI takes over and gives you a simple report telling you what Google wants you to cover in your blog post. Whether you have a new site or have been around for a while, RankIQ will take your Google traffic to a whole new level. Go to rankiq.com/niche pursuits to lock yourself in at 50% off their monthly rate. I'll put this special link in the episode's description. Hey, Jared here. Today's episode is sponsored by OneLittleWeb.com, a bespoke link building service provider trusted by hundreds of niche site business owners just like you. OneLittleWeb manually handpicks real and relevant sites for guest post backlinks that receive at least 5,000 monthly organic visitors from Google. The best part is that you can check the quality of the sites and approve or ask for replacements until you get the desired domains for your guest posts. So we've arranged an exclusive welcome offer for Niche Pursuits listeners, where you'll get a free DA40 backlink on your first order of a DA50 backlink. So again, you'll love One Little Web because A, they guarantee guest post backlinks with 5,000 plus monthly organic traffic sites. B, they let you review the sites beforehand and approve them. C, they write a 1,000 word, well-researched content post for every single guest post. So go to onelittleweb.com/niche pursuits to claim your free DA40 backlink today. Again, that's onelittleweb.com/niche pursuits.